divide over security breach.
मेरा आग्रह आपसे कि आप चर्चा करें, संवाद करें। ये तख्तियां लेकर सदन में मर्यादित आचरण नहीं है।
146 MPs suspended in winter session. Opposition benches empty during debates. Key bills passed without opposition role.
भारत द्वारा भारत के लिए और भारतीय संसद से बनाए गए कानूनों से अब हमारी क्रिमिनल सिस्टम गवर्न होगी, इसका मुझे बहुत गौरव को मन है।
Is parliamentary democracy in danger?
Hello and welcome once again to the Political Rumble, where we look at issues that are dominating the political newscape and raise several big questions around them. On this Political Rumble weekend debate, we are looking at the question that has dominated the headlines for several days now. The winter session of Parliament ended this week, but ended with a record 146 MPs being suspended. Opposition MPs being suspended because they were demanding a statement from the Home Minister Amit Shah on the security breach that had taken place in Parliament. The government, on the other hand, says that these opposition MPs violated every rule and tenet of Parliament, raising slogans with placards, entering the well of the House. At the end of the day, as the 17th Lok Sabha is slowly but surely drawing to a close, here is a figure that you must remember. Between 2004 and 14, only 50 MPs of Parliament were suspended. Between 2014 to 2024, that number has quadrupled to 2010. So is parliamentary democracy now on a ventilator? What is the future of parliamentary democracy if in every session the government and the opposition will be in a head-on collision? To answer some of the questions, Yogendra Yadav, co-founder Swaraj India, Jaiprakash Narayan, founder Lok Sabha, Rajat Sethi, political commentator. We haven't brought the BJP and Congress because we've heard their arguments on several occasions in recent weeks. Let me raise the big questions. Is there a total breakdown of Parliament? Is parliamentary democracy in danger, as some are suggesting? Has Parliament just become dysfunctional? Is the political executive taking over the legislature? Is the separation of powers only in theory? Is the Modi government in absolute control, or is the opposition increasingly desperate? Lots of questions. Let's try and get some answers. You first, Yogendra Yadav. What's your sense? You've been a critic of the Modi government. Do you believe that parliamentary democracy is in danger, or is the opposition being alarmist?
Rajdeep, to my mind, something much more than this is at stake. There comes a moment in the life of a nation where suddenly things that have been happening gradually come to you in a flash, and then you suddenly see the big picture. The expulsion of 140 MPs was one such moment. What we are looking at is not merely a virtual death of the Parliament, and I call it death of the Parliament as an institution. Yes, the building stands, probably it's a finer building than before, but as an institution, Parliament is no longer a place of deliberation of any kind. It is simply a weighing machine. It's about calculating numbers. Do you have numbers? Do you not have numbers? I'm not suggesting, Rajdeep, that this happens only yesterday or it has happened only in the last 9 or 10 years. Many of these tendencies have been gradually happening over the years. But what we saw this time has brought it to a point where we can virtually say that the Parliament as an institution really has no meaning in this country. But it's much more than simply what I would call the death of Parliament as an institution. It is also the collapse of parliamentary democracy, something about which Pratap Mehta has written so eloquently this week, and I would really want everyone to read his piece in Indian Express. Basically, the fiction of legislature, executive, judiciary has disappeared. It's an executive rule, untrammeled, uncontrolled, unregulated rule of the executive.
So you're
it's more than that.
You're suggesting
what
we are heading...
witnessing is really, Rajdeep, just
Yes.
two more steps.
Please go ahead.
Yeah. I wanted to say it's not merely parliamentary democracy, Rajdeep. What we are looking at is actually something which is happening in several countries of the world, a virtual murder of democracy itself, because it's not just parliament executive. Look at what the media is doing. Look at what's happening to public opinion. Look at all other institutions. And finally, Rajdeep, I would say we are looking at dismantling of the republic itself. We are looking at an elected monarchy where the power of the people is concentrated in one person. So this really, to my mind, is the challenge that we are facing.
Those are very strong words, and I want you, Rajat Sethi, because I know you have a very different opinion, to respond to Yogendra Yadav. He's using words like elected monarchy. He's effectively suggesting we are becoming an executive presidency, and parliament, not just parliament, but parliamentary democracy is withering away. Your response?
Rajdeep ji, I think the term what Yogendra ji just used is largely borrowed from the playbook which several Nordic countries want to belittle India's democracy around. They call it electoral autocracy, and like such jargons are thrown at Indian democracy. But look at the body politic of our nation. People here are obsessed about politics. They're deeply democratic. The values of a democratic nation run really deep in our country. And BJP has seen days when they just had two members of parliament. 1984 saw a brute majority for Congress, 414 seats they had won. And we have seen how the response of the nation to such brute majorities have been. I mean, there have been course corrections if the parties turn arrogant and turn egoistic. I'm sure that the scales of justice, the scales of public perception will swing the other way. And Indian public is deeply observant, very calculative, and they take the politicians of the day to the task if they show any bit of an executive overreach. What I'm seeing is that Prime Minister Modi, who himself has 50 years of political experience, understands these nuances really well. Where I feel the problem is it is a recession in the opposition at large. The length and breadth across the nation, the opposition parties are losing out on the issues. They don't know which issues should they raise after the 3rd of December results. They have literally turned, most of their thesis has been proven wrong. Right now, they're struggling on total bankruptcy of ideas. They're staring at that. They're just left with nothing. Look at some of these India alliance meetings. Most of these alliance meeting discussions are non-substantive. As a voter, I would want to genuinely see choices before me so that I can exercise my choice in a reasonable way. But I don't see that choices at all.
But does that in any way justify the suspensions in Parliament? Are the suspensions a symptom of a desperate opposition, or are the suspensions a symptom of a monarchical government? There are two views. One is you're saying the opposition is desperate. The other view is the government is becoming autocratic.
See, that's taking it too far. I mean, calling it a monarchical democracy or whatever two oxymoronic words are put together, it doesn't mean anything, basically. See, opposition has left a void, a huge vacuum, and an incumbent power, which is almighty, is going to grab every square inch that is left. And that is where the problem of opposition is. When you are in the pits, when you have to fight it out, your political lexicon, your tools, your techniques, everything has to change. What Congress is not able to understand, and its allied partners, is how to come out of this situation. That requires more application of mind. And this is where they are failing. In my opinion, Congress should go back to the drawing board. This is a different sort of a parliamentary setup in which the rules are being followed to the strictest possible way. I mean, these rules of not going to the well with the placard are all well established. Earlier, parliaments used to be a mockery that way. There were hardly any efficiency. Today, look at the efficiency of parliament. It runs at above 90% efficiency. So in letter and spirit, the rules are getting implemented. And this is why the MPs are getting the flack for not following the rules of the business.
It's interesting you're calling it
that it is going a little too far. but you've left the space for BJP to come in and trample on, on the voids that you're leaving over and over again.
Okay, you're saying what is actually happening is the opposition is unable to offer an alternative vision, has become desperate and despairing, and that is the real issue at stake, not some institutional corrosion that is, as Yogendra Yadav seems to suggest. Jaiprakash Narayan, two very stark different viewpoints being expressed. Yogendra Yadav predicting that we are heading towards an executive monarchy in a way, and you've got Rajat Sethi suggesting that this is only the opposition in decline. Is there a middle ground?
Rajdeep, as in many cases, the truth lies somewhere in the middle. Both of them have elements of truth. There has been a long-term decline, there's no doubt about it. It's not because of one party or the other. It's because of certain institutional lacunae. And from time to time, there seems to be some acceleration, some dramatic manifestation of it, and some excessive polarization. What's happened is we borrowed the Westminster model, where the legislature and the executive were fused inevitably. You talked about separation of powers. That's only theory. In reality, there is no separation of powers in the Westminster model. On paper, it is there, because the legislative majority sustains the government. Once the government is in power, by definition, it has majority control of the legislature. Therefore, legislature can't really hold the government to account. Take Theresa May. She had a majority in parliament, but she could not get any legislation through, Brexit, etc. Nothing could be done. There was paralysis until she chose to resign. That's the very nature of the system of government we have chosen, where legislature and executive are fused. On top of it, we brought in the terrible anti-defection law, a nice middle-class notion of morality, but actually completely throttling the legislators. Therefore, they became the slaves of the party leadership. Irrespective of the legislation, you blindly support or oppose, not on merits, but because the party bosses say so, ruling party or opposition. Take umpteen number of cases. Take, for instance, the farm laws. I've maintained then, I maintain now. They're extremely sound laws. There is no economic logic to oppose them at all. There was, of course, the government's failure to build a consensus, but there was a blind opposition without any serious understanding or debate. Take, for instance, the Ramaswamy impeachment case. Blindly, the whip was applied. Take the Muslim Women's Bill. Blindly, the whip was applied, and it had grievous consequences. So the parliament is converted into lawyer jirga. Therefore, the MPs or legislators at the state level have no real voice. We're pretending that there is voice, even when there's so-called discussion. It's a lawyer jirga. And unless we limit the anti-defection law to certain areas, and unless we limit the party boss's power over the party, because they decide the future of the members, and therefore independently members cannot really voice their opinions or exercise their vote. And without looking at that, we're pretending as if there's actually a serious, meaningful debate, even when the parliament or assemblies meet. The third big issue is local governments are dead. So your MP and MLA, he's not bothered really about legislation. You and I are debating legislation and legislative functioning. Really speaking, the legislator is actually nurturing the constituency or indulging in influence peddling because he spent a lot of money somehow, he must make good that. That is the primary purpose of legislators today. Let's be truthful. All this is shadow boxing. The fourth is the committee system is more or less ineffective. In parliament, it's somewhat functional, but not really effective because committees are not empowered. States, they are more or less non-existent. As Woodrow Wilson said, Parliament in session, he talked about Congress in America. Congress in session is Congress an exhibition. Congress in committees is Congress at work. Without committees functioning effectively, being empowered, and adequate number of legislations really going through committees instead of pushing them through quickly in a hurry, we simply cannot have meaningful legislative work. And finally, you have a situation where the Rajya Sabha has become a stumbling block. Oftentimes in India, it is thwarting will of the lower house of the people because the people elected the lower house, remember. Rajya Sabha is supposed to bring caution, not blindly follow the party diktats and delay legislation or deny legislation just because in most cases, except for money bills, Rajya Sabha has co-equal power to legislation. In Britain, there was a crisis on account of this. A budget was denied despite the government having an absolute majority with popular will in 1909 and 1910. Twice it happened. Twice they had to go back to the polls. Third time again they went back to the polls. Finally, the 1911 Parliament Act was enacted curtailing the powers of the Rajya Sabha or the upper house, House of Lords, in respect of many matters. So we have serious structural issues. It's not really about this party or that party.
I
And
take
state
your
legislatures
point.
are much worse. We only have two provisions of the Constitution that are implemented by the legislatures. Article 174.3 says there shall not be more than a gap of 6 months between, or a gap of 6 months between two sessions. That we are following because the Constitution mandates it. And Article 74 for the union government says that there shall be union government, and that union government under 75.3 shall be accountable to the House of Parliament, the lower house. Same is the case in legislature, the states. That's about the only thing. The majority giving birth to the government, and 6 months period in between two sessions. Otherwise, legislatures for long, not today, for about 40 years at least, have been pretty dysfunctional. And much more happened earlier.
I'm just going to stop you because you've raised several points that require discussion. Yogendra Yadav, one of the words that struck me in what Jayaprakash Narayan said was Loya Jirga. You know, the fact is, Parliaments in itself, anti-defection law has meant that the MPs are just, follow the herd mentality. Whatever the leader says has to be done. But more importantly, the structural issues that were mentioned just now by Jayaprakash Narayan struck a chord because I'm seeing them happening. Select committees of Parliament, standing committees, most of them don't meet often enough. Bills are not often sent to them, and even their recommendations are often not being accepted. It seems almost, therefore, that this has been building up for a while and has now led to the situation where anyone who comes to power will treat Parliament as an appendage, especially when they get big majorities. So the structural issues are as much important as you targeting any individual.
Rajdeep, let me begin by agreeing with the thrust of what Dr. Jayaprakash Narayan has said, who I respect very much. Of course it is true, and I actually said that much of this decline is not restricted only to the last 1 week, last 1 year, last 10 years. Yes, it is true that Parliament as an institution hasn't really picked up and has actually declined over the years. It is true that the fiction of parliamentary democracy is losing itself all over the world, not just in India. However, I was surprised that Dr. Jayaprakash Narayan, having registered all these things, did not register something shocking that happened last week. Something unusual did happen. I can't say that India in the first 25 years was in a very difficult situation. Indian democracy was, gradually going down. But I have to acknowledge that something happened in 1975, which was called emergency, which virtually brought death to Indian democracy. I cannot put it as a part of a grand narrative as if nothing happened. I'm sure Dr. Jayaprakash Narayan, when he gets time, would also acknowledge that something happened in this country 1 week ago, something that was shocking, something that has actually brought all these long-term tendencies to a certain point that you begin to wonder, are we living in democracy? And that's why I said, Rajdeep, right in the beginning, it's not merely the death of Parliament as an institution. It is not merely the collapse of parliamentary democracy.
Now, what is the shocker? No, what is the shocker? Yogendra Yadav, you are saying that there are incidents that have shocked you about the future. Give me a specific.
Parliamentarians get up and ask something which would be asked all over the world. Namely, please tell us, how do these people manage to enter Parliament? And the Home Minister should come and make a statement. What are the accusations? They raised placards, they entered the well of the House, they raised slogans. Please tell me if these three are unprecedented things in the Indian Parliament. Please tell me if BJP has not resorted to these earlier. Please remind everyone what late Arun Jaitley said, that these are part of parliamentary tactics, good or bad. This is what has been happening in this country. Can you throw out 150 parliamentarians? Tomorrow, you can actually throw out 100 parliamentarians and carry out a constitutional amendment in India. Because for constitutional amendment, you need 2/3 majority, but majority of the actual numbers. So you don't have 2/3 majority. Just throw out 100 parliamentarians. No one will speak about it. And tomorrow you have a constitutional amendment. I mean, what are we looking at? And the media is interested in some mimicry. I mean, this is mimicry. This is mimicry of democracy. You are talking this when 150 MPs have been thrown out. Let me express an agreement with Rajat Sethi. I have some minor disagreement with him. He thinks it's come from Scandinavia. I happen to have read political science. Please look at the Latin American literature. The entire discussion on elected authoritarianism begins in Latin America. He might wish to read that. I actually have a small thing to add to what he said, where he said, you know, Parliament has 90% efficiency. I wanted to say, why stop at 90%, boss? Make it 100%. जो 2-4 बच गए उनको भी बाहर निकलवा दीजिए ना. 100% efficiency of Parliament. 2 minutes में 80 laws pass. Is this a joke? You call it efficiency? Is this what parliaments are about? But allow me to express a deep agreement with him. The agreement is, yes, the opposition has failed. And yes, as he correctly points out, that in this country, people have a democratic sentiment. Sooner or later, people punish those who are arrogant. We don't know when, but I agree with Rajat Sethi. Sooner or later, people of this country will punish these people who are so arrogant. This elected monarchy would be brought to its knees by the people. When republic is threatened, people come out. I agree with Rajat.
Rajat Sethi, efficiency, a word used by you. Is that the choice that this country has? Efficiency meaning a majority government pushes through bills, bulldozes bills, some like the farm laws that result in a pushback, others like the crucial criminal laws that have been passed this week that required a wider debate. Is that your definition of efficiency when you said actually this parliament is more efficient than previous ones?
Rajdeep, I used to be in college when I saw the flip side of how the parliament did not function. Back around 2009, 11, those years, every single parliament session used to be a washout, a total 100% washout. There were no sittings, there were no bills, there was just no deliberations. And in Jayaprakash's words, the exhibition part of it was completely missing. We as young, young students, when we used to imagine, where should India's representatives in the parliament should behave, we used to feel sorry for the state of affairs we were in. Of course, this is not the best case scenario. And of course, I find it hard to sort of imagine that such important bills go in and you don't have the opposition voicing in and they have to merely write op-eds. But, we are in a situation where by the day, opposition is just totally missing the plot. I mean, I am telling you repeatedly, I wish they are able to do better. I wish the regional parties hold on to their ground and don't perhaps go out and join the NDA eventually, but they will. That's real politics. I mean, we can all wish that, there is more balance, but that's not how politics works. Do you think that the BJP is going to come out and say that, oh my God, this is too many seats. Let us not have 400 seats in the target for the next election. Let's just go with only 270. Let us have the other voices come in. It doesn't work like that.
No, it's not about, at the end of the day, electoral politics, first past the post with its strengths, limitations. The question is, we all want, I think, a vibrant opposition. The opposition claims, Jayaprakash Narayan, though, that institutions now are ranged against it and it isn't a level playing field. The government says, look, even in the Congress days, it was no different. Do you see a difference between what it was in majority governments during the Congress age and majority governments now, where, according to the opposition, every agency, every institution is being used to browbeat them? It's not a level playing field anymore.
Rajdeep, I don't want to indulge in whataboutery, but I've lived too long not to recognize that many of these things happen time and again. We've had MPs being forced to resign from Parliament en masse during National Front days on Bofor's issue because there was no response. We have seen during emergency what happened. And we all were exultant with joy when emergency was over, when Janata came to power. Then very soon we realized it was only change of players, no change in the rules of the game. So I refuse to be apocalyptic about any particular phase of our national life. We're going through it. Our democracy is robust, messy, somewhat dysfunctional and seriously flawed, no question about it. But it is real democracy. Let's not in any way doubt that. Having said that, take this current case of this misguided youth attacking the parliament very foolishly. It was a serious breach of security. We are lucky that it was not terrorists who could have caused havoc. There are only three possible responses in a rational society: governing party or opposition. One, how do you tighten security to prevent this breach of security in future? Two, how do you improve the protocol so that the MPs will not give passes without knowing the antecedents of people? Three, how do you ensure justice to the people who violated the security? Instead, we created a tamasha in the country. One side says only Home Minister must speak. The other side says Home Minister will not speak. Both are meaningless responses in my view.
Right.
It is zit. Both sides holding fast, not to a principle, but to a fetish, holding the country to ransom. There's no hero here. Both are guilty parties. Let me give you a second thing. Suspension en masse is actually foolish on the part of the government. Forget democracy, forget grand constitutional notions. It's actually pretty bad politically. What is the great thing you're accomplishing? Nothing. And the laws that you enacted, the three criminal laws, they came after 150, 160 years, at least two of them. Criminal justice system is in an awful mess in this country. There are 3.5 crore criminal cases alone pending in the country, the largest number in the world, and twice the number of civil cases, again unusual in the world. Our rule of law system is in shambles. Here is an opportunity to actually have cool deliberation. Take some more time, study it more. There's no hurry, there's no political necessity, there's no advantage, there's no hurry. You could have taken time in the committees. You could have had a detailed debate for a week or 10 days on these criminal laws, because after all, legislations after 150 years bring everybody in the opposition and ruling party together. Like, Lokpal bill, we had that kind of discussion. GST law. So nobody gained here. It's politically foolish, apart from the other proprietary issues.
I have to stop you for a moment because we've run out of time, but I think all three of you have raised very valid concerns. I have certainly been illuminated, enlightened by this discussion, because I think it's time for us to look beyond the noise, to look at the real issues that are bedeviling our democracy. One doesn't believe that Indian democracy is so flawed that it will collapse overnight. But we must remain sentinels, constantly guarding against any excesses. That's why we did this Parliament Roundtable. Yogendra Yadav, Jai Prakash Narayan, Rajat Sethi, thank you all very much for joining me on the show tonight. Bye for now. Stay well, stay safe. Jai Hind. Namaskar.